Hello everyone, and thank you for attending our webinar, Defending Healthcare Against Crippling Cyber Attacks. I am your host, Mindy Stubbs, Demand Generation Coordinator here at Optiv. Before we get started, a few items of housekeeping. First, this webinar is being recorded and will be available in the next few days for on-demand viewing. You can see here on the console that we have several resources you can use during or following the webinar. This includes some resources we think you'll find valuable when it comes to your security program. We have our speaker bios, social media buttons, and a Q&A chat box. You'll also find all these same widgets on your toolbar as you scroll to the bottom of your screen. Regarding the Q&A chat box, we will have someone monitoring the chat box throughout the webinar and during the Q&A period. However, we may not get to every question. If we don't answer your question, we will follow up after the webinar. Now on to the webcast. Let me take a quick moment to introduce our speakers, Todd Weber and Jackie Castelli. Todd Weber is currently the Vice President of Partner Research and Strategy for Optiv Security. This team spearheads Optiv's efforts on testing security technology solutions to help clients make better informed decisions in selecting the correct technology suite. Todd has worked with some of the largest companies in the world developing information security strategies and architectures and has over 15 years in the IT engineering, operations, and IT security field. Jackie Castelli comes with over 20 years of experience in cybersecurity. She has gained practical security experience in her roles as a security architect and data center manager. As a Director of Product Marketing for CrowdStrike, she is responsible for educating the market about the Falcon platform, CrowdStrike's next-generation endpoint protection solution. Now let's get things started. I'll turn it over to our speakers.
Thanks, Mindy. This is Todd Weber, and thanks for everybody for joining this afternoon. Hope everybody's doing well. What we hope to provide here today is a good overview of what we feel are problems and solutions that can tactically help your organizations with their security posture, especially in the healthcare industry, and the problems that we see, as well as some practical solutions and how CrowdStrike can help solve those solutions and the technologies that it's been through. Today we have some great speakers here from CrowdStrike. Jackie, we want to really take it away with your part here and how how CrowdStrike views the space and what's going on. I'll talk about some best practices and recommendations, and then CrowdStrike will get back into specifics on how CrowdStrike helps solve those particular problems, and then we'll get into some Q&A. So Jackie, you want to go ahead and...
Thank you very much. So what we're going to do now is we are going to look at an overview of what's going on here when it concerns healthcare and cybersecurity. So one of the things we wanted to share with you today, some trends and stories that we've heard from the trenches, things that we know are taking place, and real life example of some of the impact that cybersecurity has on the healthcare industry. So some of the things really come from our hands-on experience and what we're experiencing with some of our customers here at CrowdStrike. So let's take a look to get started at how the healthcare industry stacks up when it comes down to threats and attacks. And this data comes from the CrowdStrike Global Threat Report 2018, and it reflects what we have seen across our entire customer space, but also across companies that have come and helped deal with incident response when they were when they had to deal with attackers of all kinds. So real life data, not from a survey, but really from things that were observed again in the trenches. So unfortunately for healthcare, we can see that it's sharing the top position with government as being the number one attacked industries when it comes down to cyber. So there's a couple of reasons for that. We'll dig into that a little later. So it is a very, very popular target for hackers. And when you see in the second position, not very far behind government, this actually chunk of the disclosed breach not only concerns couple of big entities, but mostly those reported incidents concern smaller organizations such as local hospitals and doctor offices. The takeaway from that is the attackers are not necessarily going after the big names. They go after smaller organizations because they might not be as well protected as bigger organizations in this case. So the next question is, why is healthcare so popular when it comes down to cyber attackers? So the answer is very simple. Healthcare is a very juicy target. Back in the days, 5 to 10 years ago, attackers were all about stealing credit card information because it was an easy way to make money. But today, the value that they get from stealing credit card numbers is not nearly as high as what they can get if they can have access to personally identifiable information such as user profile and identities. The reason is, when a credit card is stolen, it's got a very short lifespan. People realize very quickly that the credit card is compromised, then the number is destroyed and they're issued a new one. So if you look at the black market, for example, you can find a credit card number, for sale for 20 cents. And if you buy it, you can make $1 or $2 out of it. You're making a 200% a profit on that, but this can last just for a couple of days, and then you have to buy new ones. For PII, it's very different. Once you have stolen somebody's identity and social security number, you can use that over and over forever because your social security number never goes away. You have it for life, and the attackers are getting a very lucrative business out of stealing identities. And a source of people's identity, of course, are all of the healthcare providers that have information such as patient name, address, social security number, birth date, and everything basically that you need to create a new identity. And as a result, 24% of the breaches that we've seen in 2017 happened to healthcare organizations, which is very unfortunate. So very targeted vertical and industry here. So the challenge with this is that once a healthcare professional is compromised, whether it being a doctor's office or a hospital or a healthcare insurance provider, everybody gets affected. So not only the companies got breached, but also patients, physicians, and providers all alike. Unfortunately, the biggest data breach that we've seen in the healthcare industry concerned Anthem in 2015 with close to $80 million records stolen in one attack. It took months literally for Anthem to realize that they had been breached, and which is the time it took for the attacker to exfiltrate all of the data. Really, the investigation showed that it took weeks to months for the attacker to exfiltrate the data, and that's how it took for the Anthem to discover that they'd been breached. Very likely the result of a nation-state attack from a big international type of actor. And what's been discovered is it took only one mishap for this to happen. Apparently, it took only one phishing email opened up by an Anthem employee for the attacker to gain access to Anthem's data warehouse and exfiltrate those close to 18 million records of data. So that's, again, the biggest healthcare breach to date. Now, attackers also like to target smaller organizations because it's easier. And one of the things that they find is extremely lucrative for them is ransomware. If you look at WannaCry, for instance, within days, 81 British hospitals got affected and it spread at the speed of light. And when I say that everybody is affected, it was not just the providers and those hospitals, also patients. So unfortunately, the weekend WannaCry broke off was also the weekend when there was an incident at the Ariana Grande's concert, and the fact that hospitals had been impacted by the attack compromised their ability to deliver care to a number of patients who were in dire need for health care. So we can see here the linkage and ramification of cybersecurity attack in the physical world all the way to putting patients' life in jeopardy, really. Unfortunate state of affair when it came down to WannaCry in England on a specific weekend of May 2017. Another example is the example of the Samsung ransomware that targeted a company called Allscripts, and that affected over 180,000 doctors as well. And we'll talk about that a little later in another example. So the thing is, how does those attacks happen, and what makes them possible? So what I want to do next is I want to step back just for a quick second and show you here what we are seeing in the industry overall. So if we look at all the vertical and not just healthcare, what we're discovering here is that adversaries are getting tactics and techniques that try to avoid the use of malware, because everybody expects now to have some kind of malware or anti-malware defenses in an organization. So they're moving forward with what we call more sophisticated techniques that do not make use of malware. For example, credential theft, or being able to exploit something, and from that foothold being able to get into an organization and start pivoting around until they can find what they want. So in the industry, we see a spread that's about like 50-50% when it comes down to the way adversaries are breaching organizations. So that number can be 50-50, it could be 60-40 or 70-30. The idea here is that malware is only part of the problem. There's another side there that organizations need to defend themselves against. And again, the spread can be very different. And I want to show you next how different the spread can be for different industries, because healthcare has a very interesting place when it comes down to the spread between malware and non-malware attack. Here, for example, if you look at the very top of the chart here, and this chart shows malware-based versus malware-free type of attacks that we have seen in real customers' environment again during the year 2017. So here you see in manufacturing, which is the top one, malware is very seldom used. Most of the time, malware-free type of attacks are being used to try to compromise organization in the manufacturing industry. But if you look at healthcare, here, in the blue rectangle, malware represents, I would say, close to 95% of the attack vectors that are targeting healthcare. So the question is, like, what justifies such a big discrepancy between the use of tactics from adversaries? Well, ideally, or the reason the adversaries will go to malware-free attacks is when malware doesn't work anymore. So for them, malware is very easy to produce and create and try to spread around. But as organizations are growing in maturity and getting better and better at countering malware, the adversaries need to come up with new ways to get what they want. And that's where they come to the malware-free tactics. Now, in the case of healthcare, it seems that malware still works very, very well. So they haven't had to make the jump to more sophisticated techniques. So what it tells us here is that healthcare is probably not as well protected when it comes to malware protection compared to the rest of the verticals that compose our economic landscape. So very easy. The other thing too that distinguishes healthcare from other type of industries is that they have a greater insider threat rate than external threats regarding to the data we're getting from different breaches, and it's probably due to the fact that there's a larger amount of human errors and employee misuse in healthcare than you'd have in other industries as well. So we're looking at huge use of malware here, which is very atypical from what we're seeing from the average. So amongst the malware that constitute the gigantic chunk of what attacks, the healthcare, what can we see? So that's the next slide here I want to show you. Is malware is huge, and out of all that, 85% is made of ransomware, which is incredible, because it means that yeah, sure, attackers like in the case of Anthem might be coming in to steal data, but mostly they're trying to come in to take that data hostage and ask for a ransom to allow the healthcare organization to get that data back, because healthcare is reliant on that information to provide services to their patients and so on. So if you look at this, that was the case for WannaCry, who hit UK hospital really hard. It was the case for the SamSam ransomware, and I wanted to give you a little bit more details about SamSam. SamSam actually spread through a SaaS provider of patient records management. And because SamSam impacted that SaaS provider, and the SaaS provider was not able to basically provide the services to the healthcare organization, everything came to a halt. Not only the SaaS, the service provider, but also everybody that it served was not able to proceed with the information that they needed to do their job. And if we look at the customer base that the organization that got hit by SamSam, how big that customer base is, it's like close to 200,000 doctors. So you can imagine that if you're a practitioner and you can't access your patient data because your cloud provider of patient data has been compromised, then you are also impacted by this attack. So the interesting part is, like, as of January 2018, the creators of SamSam had made $6 million in revenue from requesting ransom from the different providers. It's not a new ransomware. It's been around since 2015, but $6 million in 3 years is a good benefit for if you are a part of an e-crime organization. So talking about e-crime organization, what I want to do, before I hand it over back to Todd, is to tell you what kind of, adversary or organization is behind this ransomware and all of the attacks on the healthcare industry here. I want to talk about one specific example. I mean, there are many actors out there that are after healthcare, but one notable one is one we call Overlord Spider here at CrowdStrike, and they are an e-crime organization. They are mainly targeting healthcare and entertainment industries in the U.S. And what they do really here is, yes, they use ransomware, but in a very interesting way. They use mostly extortion. So what they will do is they will go in, and mostly to a lot of smaller healthcare organizations, because they are much easier to get into, and then they will ask for a ransom in order to not release that information. So they know very well that healthcare organizations are under the have to answer to a lot of legal, financial, and public relations liabilities more than a lot of other industries. So when they lose, when they potentially lose customers' data, so that makes them a prime victim for extortion. So they will go and they will basically threaten to release the PII that they've stolen from those organizations. And most of the time they try to get some high-profile customers of those healthcare organizations. And they will also indeed engage in very aggressive dissemination campaigns in the case of non-payment of the ransom. They will name the victim by name in social media. They will go as far as trying to interact with technology journalists to explain who they managed to compromise and what they managed to steal. So that's a very very nasty business, if you will, but extremely lucrative for this specific actor. And there are many, many others in the e-crime space that will use ransomware to go and make money off the back of hospital. So in a nutshell, that's the landscape of the type of threats that we're seeing here in the trenches that are threatening the healthcare industry. Number two, targeted industry with a huge use of malware in order to compromise healthcare organization. 85% of that malware is ransomware, and there are actors out there that are specialized to going after healthcare in order to make money. So now that I've depicted a very gloom situation, I think I'm going to hand it over back to Todd so he can talk about some best practices that can help healthcare organizations protect themselves against those threats.
Thanks, Jackie. Appreciate it. That's some great information, and hopefully, what I'm going to talk now is, what do we see as things that can be done at least on a best practice level and a tactical level? Many companies have asked me, and many CISOs have asked me, like, where do I start? And I know we say a lot of this stuff, but I mean, it really does make a difference on some of the core components, which is a focus on the fundamental side of this really can help, especially in the healthcare, as Jackie mentioned, with the prevalence of malware being the attack vector towards the healthcare. Well, let's look at malware in general and how do people normally counteract malware? Well, I mean, you certainly have your active defenses. CrowdStrike is a great example and is a great technology to help mitigate this, and Jackie will talk a little bit about this in a little bit more here in a bit. And those active defenses, and whether it be firewalls or proxies, in a lot of ways to help people prevent them from actually getting malware in the first place. But there are some real fundamental things that you can do that really can really help mitigate the malware scenario. The one particularly to talk about is, and what I'm showing right now is a vulnerability management program or a cyber exposures, however you want to call it. But generally, the numbers vary a little bit, but as malware goes, about 90-some% of malware in the world is written on known vulnerabilities in 5 applications. So essentially what you're saying is if you patch those 5 applications, you wouldn't be vulnerable to over 90-some% of all malware written in the world. And the vast majority of the ransomware, actually I'm not sure I've heard of a ransomware that actually doesn't take advantage of a known exploit that actually has a patch available for it. So it can show you just how prevalent, and how important things like patch management and asset management and configuration management within those assets really help. So the way we've tried to build this, and to make this easier for our clients, is to come up with a general framework around multiple technologies and processes that can help, both discover your assets, look at your assets, analyze those assets either through a vulnerability analysis of what they're vulnerable to, and then remediate that with either patch management or remediate it with some level of segmentation. Some of the gaps that you'll have, especially in healthcare, is the embedded devices and that you can't install an agent on for. And for those, you just need to be aware of where they are, what they are, and how to segment them off from the normal parts of the business so that they can't necessarily affect other components. And I mean, this is really not a magic kind of component. Is looking for ways to identify just all of the assets, whether or not those be embedded devices or corporate assets on there, and then looking for styling that against two components: a configuration management database, whether or not that be in ServiceNow or however people want to do that, and then leverage a vulnerability scanner function to look at how many devices are vulnerable, how many are running like old versions of whether or not it be Microsoft or Java or Adobe, and then coming up with ways to mitigate and patch those and put them aside. And anyway, we go kind of this, and we're coming up with ways to automate this function, because if it was easy, everybody'd be doing it. And as we've looked at it, there is no good way that's out of the box to automate these functions. But it doesn't delineate how important that it actually is to accomplish that you do it. So we actually are really trying to come up with different ways using existing APIs, or if there's not APIs, through programmatic, other programmatic ways to how to automate this for our clients. So in other words, you can take a disparate set of tools and use them to leverage to solve this one particular business problem. We see this, the automation side, and I'll even talk about this a little further in another slide, is really a prevalent function because, we have a very bad skills deficit here in cybersecurity. It's not getting better, and I don't see it getting better for any, foreseeable time frame. And so the companies are out there that are looking for ways to gain efficiencies. And automation is one of those ways to gain it. How can we do these, how can we, enrich some of the alerts that we get? How can we take that information that we get and then use it in other technologies and apply different controls on it automatically where humans don't necessarily be involved in it? Or, even if not that, at least automate the data gathering component of that. Anyway, so this is what Optiv is trying to accomplish. But even if you don't use Optiv to do this, some version of this program needs to be done at all levels, and especially prevalent in the healthcare. As you do these kinds of functions and you find yourself getting control of your assets, as well as the patch management and the remediation skills to do this, you'll find that malware becomes less and less prevalent. Now, then you get to move up the value chain as far as what other components, because the attackers will change their methods, and they'll change to more sophisticated methods, which will mean that we continue down the arms race and of facing different, more mature solutions. But right now, as Jackie mentioned, it's just too easy to move to right now exploit the normal malware channels. So how does Optiv think about in automation side? So, we typically take a blueprint example of looking at all the assets that are there, looking at what tool sets are there, what APIs are exposed with that, or what other programmatic functions are available, and then putting a context to that, which are key assets, where is data stored, be it a server or a desktop, it doesn't really matter to us. But then, taking that and applying it to what orchestration automation functions are out there. And if you really try to get into this, what we try to do is get into a tier 1 analyst's head and day of what they actually live with every day. They can get endpoint alerts, they can get other forms of alerts out of a SIEM or wherever they get them, and then the amount of time that it takes them to actually go collect a bunch of data to validate that it is a real problem or it's not a real problem, and then get to a decision point. Do I escalate this, or do I mark it as fixed or irrelevant as a false positive, or do I mark it as a true positive and I get somebody else to go into remediation? And having that, first of all, they're assuming that that plan is in place to do those kinds of escalations, or maybe if there's also an incident response plan in place, if there actually is an incident. And I'm calling an incident response plan as a fundamental because it is. The best incident response that I've seen out there in the world are typically not the first time that they've ever done it. They've practiced it. They know exactly what groups need to be involved, who needs to move forward, whether or not it be a third party or an internal resource. But generally, understanding like what context of data might have been exposed, who needs to be informed of that, and as well as matching that up to regulations, whether or not that be HIPAA or GDPR, however it may be as far as who needs to be notified and who do you have to disclose to based on what findings have been found. So anyway, as we move towards this automation function, what we did was, like I said, we got into the head of a Tier 1 analyst. How many Tier 1 analysts deal with endpoint events? Well, we're here with CrowdStrike, and CrowdStrike generates events. And what typically does an endpoint analyst at Tier 1 have to go do? And we looked at, okay, is there a malicious file? And if there is a malicious file, you have to validate that against maybe VirusTotal, maybe detonate into a sandbox. And then look at, who's the user, what group are they in, do they have access to anything that's important? And then, put it into context. And what we were doing is, for a typical manual time frame to go gather all that data, and we timed ourselves like 10 or 11 times with typical tool sets, and it took us about 30 minutes. But if you can use the automation tools that are available to you, or that can be available to you, we used Phantom, which is part of Splunk now. For this particular one, we got it down to under a minute. And if you multiply out how many endpoint events you get, and then you're looking at you're saving yourself 29 minutes per, then you can really see the gained efficiencies within your cybersecurity operations side and your incident response component, or at least on the incident investigation, I should say, and how much time you can save by looking at this and how much faster you can respond to these events. So anyway, these are the kinds of tactics that we've seen out in the world that can really make a difference, as well as heading towards the vanguard of what the future is like, especially with the automation component and looking at different methods and different ways to take advantage of technology that are out there and how you can mold your processes to those as well. So anyway, I'm going to hand it back to Jackie now to talk about more about how CrowdStrike can help out these particular problems, which is a different set, of controls, but within the technology of CrowdStrike. So Jackie, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Todd. So one of the things I want to do is now is to present you with some of the elements that CrowdStrike has that can help implement and put together the framework that Todd just described in order to help healthcare organizations. So within CrowdStrike we have an offering that can help take organizations from a lower level of security maturity all the way up to the highest possible level of maturity. And the way we look at it is maybe from a different lens, but again, it applies to the same kind of framework that Todd was describing. Is like, can you prepare yourself? And to go back to the example that he was giving is, just patching some of the vulnerabilities that constitute, 90% of the exploit or vulnerabilities that can be exploited by ransomware. You'd be ahead of the game already if you're well prepared. After that is, do you have the technology to be able to prevent that ransomware from executing and doing damage. And that will maybe take you, in the 99% percentile of prevention, but there was also the time and the aspect where the 1% or the 0.01% still goes through and manages to bypass prevention. And in that case, you need to have the detection technology, like Todd mentioned, endpoint, information collection and knowing what's going on your endpoint themselves, and that's where EDR technologies, for example, help tremendously. And if you want to take it a step further, and have to go and try to implement proactive threat hunting to go and proactively go look for malicious activities. Then after that, maybe there will be cases when you need remediation. You need maybe remediation from the different products that are provided to you or from different services providers to help you get back up and running, or maybe some orchestration tool that helps you automate this part of the security life cycle. And finally, maybe at the highest level of security maturity, getting some threat intelligence and being able to incorporate the information that you're getting from the outside in order to be better prepared and anticipate what might happen, so you can have your defenses ready before the attackers even come in. And this is the scope that CrowdStrike can help with. And if I look at how how we do it. We do it through very simple architecture. We have one agent that actually is deployed on endpoint, so we get visibility and all our knowledge from endpoint activity data, and that is managed and deployed via the cloud and through an entire platform. So that one agent can perform a host of actions on the endpoint itself, starting with prevention, detection, and it enables a lot of different things, from endpoint security to secure operation and threat intelligence integration. The one thing I want to stress out here is at the very bottom, you can actually see our APIs, which allow us to integrate really well with some offerings that, Optiv, for example, can provide, which means that we can work together, our technology together with what other, type of solutions Optiv can provide, and integrate the Falcon, the CrowdStrike Falcon technology to the rest of their offering to offer the solution that customers want. So I'm going to get into a little bit more details here and just tell you what this is made of, and just one single lightweight agent, about 25 megs in size, and that includes everything to do prevention, detection, hunting, anticipation, thanks to its integration with threat intelligence, and also giving the ability to customers to remediate incidents if they want to. Again, it's a cloud-based architecture, so there is no need to set up or deploy an infrastructure to run it. So you can get instant value from getting it. It's deployable and up and running in no time. And I should add, it constitutes a great replacement for traditional antivirus products. So at the end of the day, if you choose the Falcon platform, it yields 3 huge benefits. Number one, you get better protection, which is what you would expect from your security solution. It provides better performance because it's so lightweight and cloud delivered. It doesn't bloat endpoints with a quantity of different agents to perform the same type of things. And because it is cloud delivered, you see immediate time to value. We're actually seeing customers up and running literally in weeks, as opposed to months with other type of heavier solutions. So all in all, I wanted to say that the CrowdStrike Falcon solution, together with Optiv, constitute a great, probably a great way for healthcare organization to getting into the path of becoming more mature and not allowing malware, just simple malware, to come and do so much damage. And with that, maybe Todd, I'll hand it over back to you, or you and I can actually talk about the next, basically the key takeaways from what we just talked about.
Yeah, no, thanks, and yeah, let's do this together. But I mean, suffice it to say, I mean, I think Jackie did a great job of presenting the problem, that's faced with many of the healthcare providers today. And we talked a lot about some of the approaches to what you can do to fix some of the fundamental sides of that, as well as some of the components that are native within CrowdStrike to also help with it. As far as the takeaways go, I mean, really implementing these best practices, and I hate to say the back to basics, but the foundational component are really the building blocks, I think, of what you should start with. And those are the things that you must do well, I think, before you can move on to some of the more advanced strategies, because if your fundamentals are bad, then everything else from that will pivot to be not as effective as you need as well. So those are my takeaways, or at least the ones that I'm trying to get across, as well as leverage the technologies that you already have available to you, and ones like CrowdStrike, which really have some great APIs, and I'm not going to comment on specifics, but suffice it to say there are a lot of technologies out there that say they have APIs and say they have a lot of data sharing capabilities. Well, suffice it to say that that's not exactly true, or I mean, they may have them, but there's a lot of lack of efficacy around those, or a lot of lack of use, that there's no documentation. So do your homework on that when you actually are picking your technologies, because if you're going to plan on building some of these automation techniques that I talked about, the strength of that API is going to be key. And when we do our testing, a solid API or other programmatic interfaces are what are key. And CrowdStrike has a great one. So I mean, another takeaway is do your homework on that side. to make sure that there is good documentation and that there is good methodologies around the use of that API. Go ahead, Jackie, with yours.
Thank you, Todd. So I'm going to make 2 points actually. One point being, like, when you see the amount of malware causing so much heartache in in the healthcare industry, I would say the number one recommendation is take care of the malware problem. We know how to solve that problem. I mean, other verticals have done it really well. But as you're gaining maturity and getting better at blocking malware, also keep in mind, and that's a summary of points 2 to 6 here on this slide, is as you get better, so will the adversary. So as you're taking care of the malware problem, also remember that we move on, as Todd mentioned, to most sophisticated or more sophisticated type of attacks in order to get what they want. So point number 2 is, yes, use a technology that's easy to use and deploy, so your security doesn't depend on the ability to use the technology that you have, because that unfortunately has been a big impediment in a lot of older and traditional security solutions where just using it was difficult. Go beyond malware, because they will. As you do, so will your attackers. And this is a matter of continually assessing the risk in real time, just to know what's going on in your environment. This is key, so you don't end up in a case where you have an attacker in your environment that's been there for months and you don't know about it. Add more stuff to be more mature to your security portfolio, so such as threat hunting. And if you cannot do it in-house, there are companies out there, including CrowdStrike, that can do it really well for you. And find a way to use cybersecurity intelligence just to stay ahead of the attackers. Know who is after you, so you know how to protect yourself against them. So that's those are my key takeaways.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jackie and Todd. That was a really informative presentation. We will now open it up to questions. A quick reminder that you can post your questions into the Q&A chat box. Looks like we have a couple already, so let's go ahead and get started. All right. Jackie, you mentioned that patch management is a crucial element to malware protection. Do you find that healthcare as an industry does better than average job at patch management?
I think I'll take that one, Jackie.
Oh, okay.
Anyway,
go ahead,
Seth. Okay, thanks. What I feel is that, first of all, healthcare has some unique challenges. Overall, as you saw from Jackie's statistics there and her numbers, is that malware is even more prevalent within healthcare than most other industries, and a lot of that is due to lack of patch management. And healthcare has those unique factors of they don't control all the assets. There are many FDA-validated devices. In some cases, you're even prevented by law from updating them in a quick, easy way. And it presents unique challenges for them. So overall, I would think there's a vast room for improvement on the healthcare industry on patch management, asset management, and asset discovery side. Jackie, you want to add anything? Or?
No, I think you summarized it very well. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Next question is, how difficult is it to make these orchestration playbooks work in organizations?
It's a great question. And the orchestration foundations that we find is the playbooks typically are built within the tools. But what the playbooks do is mainly set up that orchestration between the technology functions, meaning that technology A can talk to technology B. To actually get the results that you need that you're trying to get to, you kind of have to do a lot of trial and error, and that's kind of why I think where Optiv can help clients is because we've already done that trial and error, and if the whole thing's an efficiency gain and you spend 2 hours to save an hour and 45 minutes, then you really didn't gain the efficiency side. So they're not out of the box, and they're not that easy to go validate. And it takes some time and effort and work to make it work correctly. And we've seen clients that we've helped and clients that we haven't who just bought the product from us and, have come back and complained about, that it takes a while to get these things working correctly.
Okay. Jackie, I think this one is for you. Can the CrowdStrike product help in situations where the environment is already infected?
Thanks, Mindy. That's a great question, too, and I think the fact that there's CrowdStrike in the question is a dead giveaway that I should probably answer it. But so, yes, the solution works really well. I would say, especially if an environment is already infected and corrupted. In fact, we have many prospects come to us because they don't manage to get rid of a threat or get remediation with the current tools that they have, and try many things, buy more other tools and so on, and it lasts for months and months before they finally come to CrowdStrike, and then we can help them very quickly get back up and running thanks to the technology, but also other things we have that can help in cases where environments are already corrupted. I mean, one of the big things that we have beyond the prevention and everything that can help with protection is visibility that's brought in with our EDR module, endpoint detection and response, and just that becomes a tremendous help to customers just in figuring out what's going on, what is happening, which machines are compromised, and what they should do next to get back to business. And that level of visibility is usually what helps tremendously. So yes, absolutely. If you're finding yourself in a situation where we're struggling to get back to a clean state, CrowdStrike can absolutely help you.
Great, awesome. So this is the last question. Just a reminder, you can submit into the Q&A chat box. You mentioned ransomware as one of the most prevalent threats to the healthcare industry. How does CrowdStrike help in that area?
Oh, love this question. We can help in many ways because we can block and stop ransomware, not just by using one technology, but by having multiple technologies. And actually, there are videos you can watch in our website that shows you how those multiple technologies work together. Where, for example, the first thing that we do is we use machine learning to detect ransomware convict files if they are malware or not. So that's one thing. So that's very efficient against ransomware. But also having this demo, we actually turn off the machine learning protection and show you what happens. And the solution is still capable of blocking it by using what we call indicators of attacks. And that's a behavioral analysis that is made on the events of the activity that's taking place on the endpoint, and it's capable of deriving whether it's a ransomware type of activity or not before damage is done. And actually, there is another offering there where we believe so strongly that the solution will help that we will offer, up to $1 million breach prevention warranty if one of the users of the specific solution gets breached when they are using it. So there's multiple layers of protection here that we can offer against ransomware.
Great. Okay. Well, Todd and Jackie, I want to thank you both again. That concludes today's webinar. Thank you for participating, and we hope you enjoyed the presentation. You will be receiving a follow-up email that will include links to review today's webinar recording and the additional resources. Thank you all. Have a great day.